What's up, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of The Real Breakdown. Today, we're going to be talking about episode number 5 of Wandavision. We've been covering this as this show goes along, and guys, the surprises just keep on coming. We will be talking about some spoilers, just a heads up, but other than that, guys, let's just get right into this episode. My gosh, episode 5. Wow, so far it's been my absolute favorite episode. We had so much going on with this. We have to take a quick recap. So some of the major things that had happened in this episode were obviously Agnes breaking character. When she did that, when she started, saying like, do you want me to take that again? Do you want me to take that from the top? It was just such a, oh my gosh, like awkward moment. But I thought that was, it created such an interesting and like awkward vibe that I really liked how the show took that. So another thing, obviously the twins, they're babies. They got aged up to 5. Then they got aged up to 10, and they almost aged themselves up again. So something that was something that was completely unprecedented. But then obviously kind of showed that the kids, obviously have powers. Or maybe it could be something that Wanda's controlling. Another crazy thing is we find out through Sword that Wanda actually stole the Vision's body. So people were wondering from last episode, like, wait, does that mean that Wanda's been, moving around a dead Vision's corpse? That is almost fully confirmed because they said, they had video footage of Wanda breaking into, Sword headquarters to steal the Vision's body. That they said that happened about 9 days ago. So that was something that kind of put a theory to rest as far as like confirming it and saying like, yep, she has his body. This is a dead Vision, but we'll see what they fully say in the show. The other thing that we did see, obviously, a huge development, was that Vision was able to talk to Norm. Now, not just talk to Norm how he usually does, but actually get him out of Wanda's control and actually speak to the person underneath. And what he said was frightening. He said, she's hurting me, it hurts, she's controlling me, these aren't my thoughts, it's not all me, and the Vision, obviously, just like all of us, were shocked and we're like, what? Like, whoa, so she's suffocating him. We heard earlier, too, Monica Rambeau say she felt like she was drowning. She felt sorrow. She felt pain. So we're starting to get some insight into, what that mind control of Wanda looks like and what these victims are actually going through. So that was really interesting to see, and I thought that was going to be one of the biggest moments of the show. Obviously, there were bigger moments. The other great thing, and one of the highlights of the episode for me, is we get to see Wanda come out of the hex. Like, they send that 80s drone in. They piss her off. They fire a missile at her and her children. And she comes out and faces them, says, this is your only warning. Like, I will F you guys up if you try to come near me. And then we get that awesome moment where, she literally pulls a Magneto, right? She uses their own guns against him and, has him point him at the Sword director. So I thought that was super cool. I cannot believe that she actually came out of the hex. Like, when that happened, I was like, what? I was freaking out. Man, I kind of wish I would have been doing like a reaction video to this one because my reactions for this ones were insane. I just kept like, I was hopping up and down in my seat for sure. That's how good this episode was, and I think it's one that we're going to remember for a while. So, so that was amazing. Can't believe she came out of the hex. And to me, guys, when she went back in, it felt like she was reinforcing it because we see that it went from blue kind of turning into red. So I felt like she's reinforcing it. I'm interested to see what happens in the next episode, but I don't think they'll be able to get people through or drones in or anything like that anymore. She probably just made it a lot harder for them, and that's kind of on them, right? So I did like the conversation she had with Monica Rambeau there, but still didn't matter. She's like, look, I already have what I want. Just, stay out of my way. I'm never going to let anyone take that away from me again, hinting at Thanos there. So yeah, that was an incredible scene. Also, we get this interesting conversation when the boys find out that, Agnes shows them that Sparky is dead. He ate the leaves that he wasn't supposed to from the bush. The kids start talking to Wanda and saying, hey, like, you can fix anything. You can bring back the dead, like, bring our dog back. And even Agnes is like, what? Like, you can do that? And Wanda has that conversation with them of like, hey, like, death is something you have to deal with. Death is something that you have to handle. But it's interesting that she says that because in reality, she's the one who's not handling it well, right? She's the one who's bringing Vision back using his dead body. She's the one who's coping through it. Maybe this is one of her coping mechanisms through her children. I also think her children could just be like, her subconscious expression, right? So like maybe what the children are saying are also kind of what her subconscious is thinking. I'm still not sure how this whole reality bubble works, or how she's making it work, but yeah, so I thought that was very interesting. They had a good conversation. Obviously then Vision shows up and it's like, what's going on? So but that leads us into the next thing that happened. So yeah, so the next thing was Wanda and Vision's argument. By far one of my favorite moments in the show. I think it is my favorite, even from the, last second reveal there of the show. But like, man, to see Wanda and Vision go at it, I mean, that visual of like, that shot of like Vision floating up and then Wanda floating up and them just being like so serious about it. And I love when Wanda says like, you've never talked to me like this before. And I'm like, yeah, we've never seen this. We've never seen Vision this mad. We've never seen Wanda this mad. I mean, maybe we've seen her that mad when, they killed Pietro. But it was incredible to see them go head to head. I mean, we'd kind of seen a little bit of it before in Civil War when, she took down Vision, basically. So we know what can happen there. But this was so interesting. I absolutely loved how they did it, where, he tells her, hey, like, look, I spoke to Norm, like, what you're doing is wrong. And she's like, I don't know what you're talking about. And he's like, look, you can't control me like you control the other people. And she's like, oh, really? Can't I? And then he just bows his head and the credits roll and she's like, I'm going to sleep. And then he's like, no. And then, oh my God, it was just genius. I thought they did a phenomenal job with it. Very entertaining, and it just kept me on my heels, and I was just like, ooh, like, what's gonna happen, so yeah, very, very cool. And then obviously, guys, everyone has to talk about that huge reveal at the end. Who's at the door? We're not sure. We see the back of someone's head. We see the silver hair, and I'm like, Quicksilver. Aaron Taylor Johnson from Age of Ultron is back as Quicksilver. But we all get surprised and shocked to see that it's Evan Peters from X-Men. The X-Men Quicksilver shows up at her door, and let me tell you guys, I wish I would have done a reaction to this, because I was jumping out of my chair. I was going like, oh my God, I can't believe it. Can you believe this? Quicksilver from the X-Men. Evan Peters is here. What? This is crossover? This is the crossover? Like, oh God, I was all over the place, guys. And I was just so happy and excited. I mean, this is the first time that we've seen anything, any indication that the MCU, Kevin Feige, is starting to bring in the X-Men characters, the X-Men universe. This is the first time we're seeing it, and I cannot wait to see what this next episode has. So that was a quick synopsis, guys, of all the crazy things that happened in episode 5. I do have some theories. We've definitely learned a lot, so we're going to go through them here real quick. So obviously, guys, with this show, there are a ton of theories going around the web. So many ways that this show can go. But there's a few things that I think that people haven't really touched on, or at least some theories that I have as well, that I kind of want to go over. So number one, Agnes, right? Everyone's been talking about Agnes. What involvement does Agnes have? Because obviously now she's seeing kids age up. She's seeing them use their powers, and she's just acting like it's totally normal. She's obviously clearly only willing to do what Wanda wants her to do. So what's going on with her? I personally think, and I know that I've heard this around a few times, is that Agnes is actually the representation of Agatha Harkness, which is in the comics, a mentor-like figure to Wanda. In this episode, she does call herself Auntie Agnes, which kind of just gives me vibes of Agatha Harkness in the comics. So I do believe that she's that, but I think it goes a little further. All right, so here's a theory that I have. So there's two theories that I kind of have. Number one, and as every episode goes on, my theories change, but at first, when I heard that Mephisto, people were saying Mephisto has to be involved, Ralph, Agnes's husband, like, that's the name for Mephisto in the comics, blah, 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 which I haven't checked on that, but that's what I've heard. And for me, at first I was like, no way, Mephisto, that's too far out. But now I'm starting to think, wait, this could be Mephisto. Like, let's think about this, guys. What if Wanda made a pact with Mephisto? What if they made a pact? What if Wanda said, hey, I want my husband back, and I want to live a normal life. Like, bring him back to life. I want him back. Whether she can do that or not, we're not sure. We haven't actually physically seen her bring someone back. But, her saying, I want my husband back, or Mephisto coming to her and saying, hey, I can give you your husband back. I can give you the life you want. But in return, Mephisto says, I want all these souls. I want you to, take over, create your own quarantine, create your own reality bubble. And I want all these souls, and I want their suffering, and I want their, just kind of how Monica Rambeau was explaining it, and how Norm was explaining it, that they were suffering, that they were in, in sorrow, and that, and maybe Mephisto needs that, maybe he wants that, maybe he's struggling himself, and he's feeding off of that. I'm not sure, right? These are just theories, but so what if they did make a deal, and what if Agnes is kind of like the intermediary, right? So like whenever things are going south, Mephisto sends in Agnes, or maybe Wanda sends in brings Agnes on herself, and to fix things so that the reality stays, so that Vision doesn't fully break out of it, so that this spell, or this magic, or this quarantine doesn't get broken, and that it continues, because it's part of a bargain that was made, and it's something that obviously Wanda wants to keep going, and I think Mephisto would want to keep going. So just kind of an interesting thought. I mean, because, and at this point, that would kind of explain why Quicksilver shows up, because we see that Vision's starting to break things down, and Wanda's starting to lose control. Not lose control, but like she's starting to not be able to control everyone in her reality. Obviously not Vision anymore. So I think it would make sense for Mephisto to say, like, all right, we're losing it, we have to keep this going, so here, let's send in Quicksilver. I'll throw her a bone. Keep her I'll keep her in check by throwing her brother, so that way we can keep this thing going. I don't know. It's just a theory, guys, but that's the only way that I think I could connect to Mephisto. I think it would make sense. I don't know if that's as far as Marvel would want to take it, but I'm just throwing ideas out there at this point. The other theory that I personally have come up with, based off of some stuff that I've heard, and I think is pretty viable, is when Vision brings up that there are no other children in Westview. Like, why aren't there more children? The park is empty every day I walk to work. So to me, what that signals is that the children play a big role. Obviously, we've heard a lot of rumors that this story was going to relate a lot to House of M, the House of M storyline, in which obviously, Wanda loses her mind, partially when she finds out that, her two twins that she has aren't real. There was a conversation on the Sword side of this episode that said, like, hey, so who are these minors? Like, what are their, who are their parents? Like, who are they in the town? And they were like, no, they're nobody in the town. Like, they're something that Wanda created. So what happens if at the end of this episode, so my theory is that at the end of this episode, they break the reality, they get her out, but then the aftermath is that she realizes, they tell her, hey, your twins aren't real. Your kids don't actually exist. All the people like Norm, Agnes, Herb, and all that stuff, like, yeah, they're real. They were actually townspeople, but your children, by us getting you out of here and breaking you out of this, they do not exist. Your children are gone. And so I think that is, that would break her and destroy her to a point where she would have a House of M moment, but instead of saying no more mutants, she would say no more children, and get rid of all the children in the MCU world. So think about that. All the children, meaning children from, 10 and under, or 12 and under, right? Because 13 is considered a preteen, so Spider-Man wouldn't be affected. A lot of the teens and preteens wouldn't be affected, so it would only be the children. So Cassie Lang wouldn't be affected. Hawkeye's daughter wouldn't be affected. So those stories could continue. But think about that, because I know, and one thing that kind of furthers my belief in this theory is that, there were those leaked images of the Spider-Man set, right? Spider-Man, the next Spider-Man movie, which we have been told, does connect and correlate with WandaVision. And what did we see? We saw a wall of a bunch of posters, and a lot of those posters were of missing children. So if you think about that, if this season ends with Wanda saying no more children get, disappear, and the next episode or the next movie comes out and it's Spider-Man that connects to this, we're getting set photos that say children are missing. I mean, I think that kind of makes sense, and maybe Doctor Strange is the one that fixes all this, or decides to reverse it, or whatever it might be. But I do think that they are setting up Wanda to be a villain in the further movies, or at least like them having to fix what she's done. And I think it makes total sense. And obviously there's a lot of videos resurfacing right now of interviews that, Elizabeth Olsen has given, where she has said, like, my favorite storyline is House of M. Like, I would love to play around with that storyline, on film. And we do know that, WandaVision was created after Endgame, after Infinity War. So Kevin Feige had to, go to Elizabeth Olsen and Paul Bettany and say, like, hey, this is the idea that we have, and kind of convince him to come back. What better way to convince him than to do House of M, than to have her, have a moment like, no more mutants, but in this case, have it be no more children. I don't know, guys, that's my theory. I think it's a pretty solid theory. I'm not really a theory guy, but this one I feel pretty good about. I think it would be very interesting if they went that route. So those are my thoughts on that, guys. I'm so excited for episode 6. We will obviously be covering that. And oh, by the way, guys, too, like, this episode was like 90s themed. Like, it was like Full House and like a mix of other stuff, like the theme song. I know it had elements of Full House because I watched Full House a lot when I was growing up. But I know that there's another show that it was resembling, but I don't remember it. But I loved this decade that they went through. I thought the house looked great. I thought the wardrobe was great. The acting is still phenomenal. My gosh, Elizabeth Olsen and Paul Bettany are just fantastic. And obviously, on the other side of things, Monica Rambeau, Kat Dennings' character, and Jimmy Woo, like, are great as well. So a lot of great acting, a lot of great performances, and I'm just excited for the next episode. So with that said, guys, I'm going to leave it here, and then we will see you guys in the next one.